Winter sowing is an easy and budget-friendly way to jumpstart your garden during cooler months. Today, I'll walk you through everything you need to know, from what winter sowing is to how to make it work for your unique climate, and I'll show you my tips and tricks to make it more organized and sturdy. Hey y'all, it's Amanda and this is my Texas Zone 8 garden. And before we dive in, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a fellow gardening friend. Okay, so this has been a very asked for video. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through winter sowing. We're going to focus on secrets for success. We're going to talk about what winter sowing is, past about winter sowing. We're going to talk about what is good for winter sowing, especially in zone 8. Then I'm going to show you my version of winter sowing, which is a little bit different because I'm a control freak. And that's just how I roll. And then we're going to talk about some tips for success specifically in zone 8 with winter sowing. And then we're also going to talk about any issues that you might run into with winter sowing. And so it's an all-encompassing video regarding winter sowing. Okay, so I started winter sowing maybe 8 years ago, and I've had great success with it. However, I found it annoying and fidgety with the milk jugs. The milk jugs really stressed me out. The whole manipulation of the jugs really made me just stress me out. And so I stopped and then I started some more and I kind of just developed my own technique. I don't do a ton of winter sowing. I kind of just do an all-in-one winter sowing all together and that's it. So with that in mind, I'm excited to show you my technique and how I approach it to simplify and make things a little bit easier for myself. But let's talk about winter sowing in general first. Okay, so what is winter sowing? I mean, that's really a basic thing. It's a seed starting method that mimics nature's way of germinating plants. So we're going to be putting seeds outside and allowing nature to bring on the natural germination of the plants. It involves planting seeds in mini greenhouses, such as milk jugs or clear plastic boxes. The containers are placed outside during the winter months and allow seeds to experience the natural cycles of freezing and thawing and warming that trigger germination. So it's a little bit more of a controlled way of starting seeds outside. Instead of direct sowing them into your ground, we're doing it in these containers, which basically consolidates what is happening outside, the freezing, the thawing, all back and forth, consolidates it all in one, gives you a little bit more of a controlled situation, and therefore should give you better germination rates. Now, winter sowing started with a lady named Trudy Davidoff in the early 2000s. She basically started as an affordable, low-maintenance way to grow strong plants without the need for indoor grow lights or expensive equipment, which I can totally understand. So I've got all my grow lights and stuff that I've created and bought over the years, and I've worked really hard to keep it cost effective. That doesn't mean it's cheap. And so I've developed all of my stuff over multiple years to spread out the costs as well. But I know a lot of people who want to start indoor sowing and they go buy everything at once, and it's a huge expense. So winter sowing is a different, more affordable option for starting your own seeds. It uses readily available materials, reduces costs, it frees up indoor space, and for someone like me who is running out of indoor space, that's really important. And it produces hardy seedlings that are better adapted to the outdoor conditions because they were started and grown outside. Okay, so I am in zone 8, Texas, North Texas area, and our zone is ideal for winter sowing because of the hot mess that our weather is. So why winter sowing is great for zone 8. Winter sowing takes advantage of our mild winters. While we may not have piles of snow, although we did this like last week, the cooler temps or occasional freezes are perfect for stratifying seeds naturally. Stratifying just mainly going through a freeze and thaw cold period for a seed, sometimes moist, sometimes not, just depending on the seed. But stratification just basically tells a seed it's time to wake up and germinate. It helps gardeners manage the unpredictable weather that Texas is known for, as seedlings are well protected inside their containers as opposed opposed to just being sown directly into the garden soil out in the elements. So best plants for winter sowing in zone 8. There's a lot of options, tons and tons of options, and I am going to be starting some of them today. Basically, if you're in zone 8 or whatever zone you're in, you need to just do a little bit of investigation and see what seeds are going to work best. So you're looking for things that work best for hardy plants that require cold stratification or thrive in cooler temps. Some examples of those, and I'm going to go through the list a little bit slower just so you can also see some of the pictures along with it. For perennials, black-eyed Susans, Shasta daisy, coneflower, milkweeds, coreopsis, gaillardia, penstemon, lupins, and rudbeckia. So those are all perennials. And then going on to cool season vegetables, lettuce, spinach, kale, broccoli, cabbage, Swiss chard, arugula, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, carrots, radishes, turnips, beets, snow peas, and sugar snap peas. And some annuals are sweet alyssum, poppies, they especially love this setup, snapdragons, larkspur, calendula, bachelor's buttons. And then finally, some cut flowers that work well with the winter sowing process, delphiniums, statice, scabiosa, and nigella. Okay, so there are a lot of different ways to do winter sowing, and I think adapting different ways, whatever works best, is what works best for you. I don't like the milk jug containers. I get frustrated by the duct tape. I get frustrated that I can't see inside well enough. I struggle with labeling. That whole process drives me insane, and I think that's what turned me off from winter sowing. So what I have done instead is I have just kind of adapted that whole idea and situation and made it a little bit more clean line or streamlined and organized, which I think that process works better for me. So let me talk you through that process. Okay, so here's what I like to use. I just have a plastic container. It's like $8, $9 from Walmart, and it has a lid, and I prefer the plastic containers that have these snaps on top instead of just like the lid snapping. It actually has the handles come up and over, and that really helps and is more secure. You can get some cheaper versions, smaller versions at the Dollar Tree, but they don't typically have this latch. And I found that especially in our strong winds and unpredictable weather, that the latch is a super important thing to have. Now, typically with winter sowing, you would just fill the inside with like 3 inches of soil and just do all your seeds in here. That also drives me crazy because it's all just a big hot mess all mixed up in there. So I like to use little containers, and these containers are left over from some containers I bought maybe 2 years ago that weren't necessarily the right size to fit inside my 10 by 20 water reservoir trays, but they work great for this situation. They're nice and deep. I don't fill the soil all the way to the top. We're only doing about 3 inches of soil, so it even allows the seedlings to be a little bit more protective and sink down in here. And I can fit 15 containers in here, which is great. Now, you do not have to use these containers. You can totally work, if you like this same kind of idea, you can work with repurposed containers from the your local nursery. You can probably fit more of them in here, but this is what works best for me. And in following that, basically what I do is I put the soil in here and I sow an individual types of seeds in each container. So like all the delphinium would be in this container. And then And here would be all the coreopsis or whatever. And maybe I've got 2 containers of spinach. So I set it up so that all of them can germinate in here, and they each have their own specific container for all of that one particular seed. And then when the time comes and these sprout and I need to take them out, I can take them out in this container, divide it out as needed, and spread them out into multiple other containers, and then I'm good to go. I don't have to disturb one big mat of soil, because that's typically what would happen is all of these in here. Let me pull all these out. So typically you would have your clear container or milk jug, and you would fill it up with just 3 inches of soil in here. And then you'd be like, this section is the seed and this section is the seed. The problem with that, in my opinion, is disturbing other seedlings, or if some seedlings have germinated and some haven't, or milk jugs. If I'm starting 15 different varieties, I've got 15 milk jugs all over the place. It's just a little bit harder of a situation. So this process makes it way easier for me. So I want to show you how I prepare this container and how I go ahead and get everything sown and set up in this container, and how easy this process can be for very inexpensive. Okay, so let me show y'all how I get this started. Go ahead and put my lid on. We're going to need holes on top and holes on the bottom. And I typically do mine with a drill. I find it way easier. I don't like to melt the plastic because of the fumes it releases. So I typically just come in here and get a drill bit. I don't like it to be teeny tiny holes. I like a little bit larger hole. I think this is, what size is this? Like 3/16, 7/30, something like that, right around there. So basically we're going to have holes in multiple places, all right? We need a few drainage holes. Now, my approach with this is, because I've got all of these little containers in here, if this gets overfilled, I can pull these containers out, dump out the water, and then put it, be good to go. So I don't put tons and tons of holes in here. Okay, so I've just put 4 in here, which works just fine for me. Then across the top, we have to add holes in here so that when it rains or snows, apparently, because apparently we're 6 years in a row of snow here in the North Texas area, you have to put quite a few holes on the top, because when it rains and snows, we want that rainwater and that snow to filter in to this container and continually water it. So I'm going to go through. Now, so I put 4 holes in the sides. I typically like to put all of my holes along the outside edge instead of in the center, because I like the water to basically, when it goes through the lid, right, and it goes through, I like for it to hit the side and go to the base and fill in the base, instead of water dropping directly on top of the seedlings or disturbing the seeds. So that's kind of what works best for me. All right. So just like that, I ended up putting 4 holes down each of the long ends and then 2 over here. So a total of 12 holes all the way across, just like that. Okay, so now my container is set and ready to go. So now I can start filling my pots and prepping those to go in my container. So let me show you how that process works for me. Okay, so my process is going to look just a touch different, because I typically like to start and work with dry soil. I don't like to make a big mound of wet soil inside my house. I could go outside and do that right now, but it's like 30 something degrees out there, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to start by filling up a water reservoir. This is a 10 by 20 seed starting water reservoir. I'm going to fill it up halfway to start. And then as I'm filling my containers, I'm going to place them into here. So I'm just basically going to come through, and I'm using a basic potting mix. And I think this works better than a seed starting mix. I'm going to fill it up for about 3 inches in the container. And then I'm just going to put it directly into this pot to begin sucking up the water. And I will have to step away and allow this some time to continue drawing up the water, but I mean, I don't care. My life, I feel like all my videos, not sure y'all realize, most of my videos are broken down because I'm always broken down into multiple little parts because I'm always running around taking a kid someplace or something. So, and it's really important you have at least 3 inches of soil because that's what a lot of the root systems need to get started and to be successful. Now, a lot of people will just put a few. You can use a few seeds in each of these. Like maybe you are someone who doesn't like potting up, which I don't love potting up. I find it a little bit tedious. So maybe you're someone who doesn't like potting up, and that's taking a small seedling and moving it into a larger container to allow the root system to continue to grow on. Potting up. Maybe you don't want to do that. So maybe you want to use this kind of system right here, and you just put 1 or 2 seeds in there for whatever it is that you're starting, and then your seed can remain in this container the entire time until you finally decide to plant it out into your garden. Now, I am someone, I don't plant a lot of teeny tiny seedlings out to my garden. I grow a lot of stuff pretty far on to fruition prior to planting that, and that's just a personal thing. Like, that's just something I like to do. I like it to look like I went and bought all my pots at a nursery. I think that's really, really fun. But you can definitely just take the small seedlings and plant them directly into your garden. I don't have as much success over that specifically because of the fluctuation of temperatures in the Texas area. And so this process makes it a little bit easier for me, allowing them to grow on a little bit farther along in these pots before I transfer them out. Okay, while those are soaking, I'm going to shift this backwards. I'm going to go ahead and pull out all the seeds that I'm going to be starting and go ahead and prep all of my labels, and then I'll show you which ones I'm going to start. Okay, I got distracted and it's the next day. Happens. I was trying to get all my kids ready. We've had a couple of days of snow days. I was trying to get them all ready and get out the door for the first day back. Okay. So what we've done is the soil has soaked up water. I'm just coming through with my hands and I'm kind of just firming it up really quick. Don't want to compact it too much, just enough. Okay, for the different varieties of seeds. So each of these seeds, I've got 15 different varieties of seeds. Each of them have a little bit of different requirements going into their containers. I'm not going to go through all 15 varieties of seeds. That would be a lot. But just go ahead and make sure you read your packet, your seed packet, and follow directions. If they need to be 1/4 of an inch deep, if they need to be 1/8 of an inch deep, if they need vermiculite, whatever works best for them. So I'm going to go ahead and get that knocked out and get these labeled, and I'll show you what these look like in their new container. Okay, those are done. So we're going to go ahead and open up our container, and I'm going to go ahead and put all of these in here, and then I'll take it outside and I'm going to water it one more time. Go ahead and put the lid on. Okay, so you want a location that's nice and level. And you want a location that's going to get a good amount of sun all day, but it's also protected from high winds. So this way is south. So this guy where it is should get sun pretty much all day, but I've got it between some of these raised beds. So it's a little more protected from wind. It's also raised beds that way, protecting it from wind, and it's in the backyard. So I've got fences protecting from too high of wind craziness. And you do need to check on this quite frequently. You need to check to make sure that the soil is moist. What you're really looking for is you're looking for maybe a little bit of humidity or moisture in here. If you feel like it's not holding the humidity or moisture, like you look and you don't see little droplets on the side, then you might have too many holes, and you can come in with like a piece of duct tape or Gorilla Tape and tape up some of the holes to hold the moisture in a little bit better. And I'm going to give these one final watering before we're done with them today. All right, and we just want it to be like rain over everything. Watering everything in really good. And we want it to be like rain so that it's not dispersing the seeds everywhere. Gonna give these all a really good watering. Remember, we have holes at the bottom to allow water to drain out. And then we'll just go ahead and put our lid in, just like that. Awesome. Okay, so let's go back inside, and I want to talk to you guys about a few things to look for and some troubleshooting to deal with. Okay, so we place them outside in a sunny protected spot where they'll get natural exposure to rain, snow, and freezing temps. You want to avoid standing water. You don't want them sitting in a puddle because that's not helpful at all. All right, tips for success in Texas weather for winter sowing. And I do want to stem this with Texas weather because we are a hot mess weather here in Texas. It's up, down, all over the place. Location matters. Where you place them outside is extremely important in Texas. Choose a spot that gets good sunlight during the day, but is shielded from harsh winds, which we just talked about. We do get a lot of harsh, dry winds here in the Texas area. If you are doing something like milk jugs, you can use a bungee cord. Run the bungee cord all the way through all the handles and bungee cord all the handles together and hold the whole set together as one. Typically, if you're leaving them just the milk jug by itself, it's going to get knocked over and moved around and it messes up the seeds. It's not good. So I highly suggest doing something like that with the bungee cord. I think that mine will be fine because it's a big container. I've got a lot going on. However, if I was having an issue, I could put a couple of bricks on top to help weigh it down as well. Okay, in regards for watering for our area, our winters can be dry, so check periodically to ensure that the soil doesn't dry out, and check for humidity and water if needed. So I talked about the humidity is when you can kind of see like a water droplets on the sides of the plastic container. That's the humidity level. Humidity level is important. But you definitely want to go out there and check. And if you have to open the lid and check, then open the lid and check. Stick your finger in there, see if the soil, if it's moist. If it's not, then that's a problem. You can also just lift up the container. If it doesn't feel heavy, that means the water is all drained out and the soil is dry. And then if you need to, just do exactly what I did with kind of a rain head or light shower. Emulating rain across the top. We don't want to do like a hard pour and disperse the seeds, but just a light rain works really well, and you can add water as needed. Okay, also here in Texas, you want to monitor temperatures because we are like this during the winter. So while winter sowing thrives on fluctuation of temperatures, if a sudden heat wave hits, consider moving containers to partial shade. And that is a real reality. So let's see, today is Monday the 13th, January 13th, and on Thursday and Friday before this, so like the 9th and 10th before this, we were in freezing temps with snow, with 6 inches of snow. This upcoming Friday, so 14, 15, 16, 17, the 17th, it's going to be 70 degrees outside. So I need to keep an eye on it. Now we're going to go right back into cold snap coming back in. But if we were to be at 70 for multiple days, I would need to move it to partial shade so I don't literally cook my seeds. Okay, next is transplanting. So we want to transplanting at the right time is super important. Once seedlings are a few inches tall and outdoor conditions are stable, they're ready to transplant. I rarely transplant mine directly outside. So just so you know, typically I take the little bitty seedlings and I will pot them up in containers. I might still keep them outside in my greenhouse in the cooler temps, but I will move them to their own containers about like this size, because you got to think, I just put a whole bunch of seeds in each of those containers. And so we want to make sure that we spread those out because I can't grow 10 seeds in one container like that. So literally what I'll do is I'll prick them out and I'll put them in larger containers, and then I'll move them either to the greenhouse or inside depending on how far along we are through our winter. I highly expect that with 15 different varieties of seeds, they will germinate at different times, and they will grow at different rates. And so one thing about the way I have it set up, I can just pluck out a pot that's ready to go, close it back up, and leave everything else in there without disturbing all the other seeds, which that's one of the main reasons that I like to utilize kind of my own version of this method. Okay, let's talk about some issues or problems with winter sowing, because definitely every time I do something on on the channel, people ask, well, what happens if this problem happens? So addressing problems is super important, and you're not always going to be successful at winter sowing. I find that myself as a gardener, I am far more successful inside where I can control the conditions than I am outside. But that's just me, because I know that there are lots of y'all who are like winter sowing geniuses and all of your seeds germinate all the time. So let's talk about some issues and problems. So poor germination. The poor germination, usually there's issues with you picked a seed that was not suited for winter sowing, so it doesn't need cold stratification or winter sowing. So it just doesn't do well with that method at all. Seeds planted too deeply or too shallowly. So remember, I was doing 15 different varieties. I checked with each different variety and made sure that I followed the instructions for each different variety. So every single one of them was slightly different. The other one with poor germination is your soil dries out or becomes waterlogged. So you definitely want to make sure you're checking and you're balancing that, not too much water, not too little water. Okay, next is mold and algae growth. Typically that's due to poor drainage in the containers, so you can always add more holes to the container. You can also put a couple of bricks under your container and lift it up off the ground so the water can drain more freely from the ground. That's always helpful. And you might be overwatering or overly moist conditions. And if that's the case, you just need to give it a little bit of time to dry out, just a touch, not all the way, just a touch before you water again. Okay, next for issues and problems, containers overheating, which I feel is extremely common in the Texas area because our temperatures goes up and down. And whatever temp you have on the outside of the container, it's always going to be warmer inside the container because you're containing it. You're almost making like a little hothouse for it. So with that being said, unseasonably warm weather causing containers to act like hothouses. So what you may need to do is move your container out of the sun into partial shade so it's just not getting like 8 to 9 hours of full blasting hot sun all day long. So next on issues and problems is seeds and seedlings drying out. That typically happens when we have a dry winter weather or infrequent precipitation. The only way to battle that is to consistently check on your seedlings and your seeds, checking the soil to make sure it's staying moist to the point that you feel comfortable. And the other thing is, if you're having issues with the seeds or seedlings drying out, perhaps your soil wasn't moist enough to start with. So that's why you saw me go through and do a nice heavy watering. I might even do another watering later today, just making sure that we're really good and consistent water throughout the whole each container. Okay, and next is wildlife or pests disturbing. So some animals may investigate containers out of curiosity or searching for food. And if that's an issue, I don't typically have that, although I had that darn armadillo, but the armadillo has been back for a long time and is probably hibernating at this point. That you can put a couple of big rocks on top of your container, and that should deter pests because they would have to work a little too hard. Now, I can't help raccoons and all that craziness. I mean, those guys are going to go for it. And I don't typically deal with a lot of squirrels, and I know squirrels can be quite the menace. So really keep that in consideration and put them perhaps in a location or within a fence where wildlife will not disturb them. Next on problems and issues, seeds germinate too early. An early warm spell can trigger germination before the last frost date. I don't typically stress about it because, like I said, I don't let them germinate and then just plant them outside. Typically, I will pot them up into other containers and I'll either have them under my grow lights or I'll have them in my small greenhouse outside. So if they germinate early, that's not a big deal. That doesn't stress me out. However, that might be an issue for other people. So really think back from your last frost date. My last frost date is middle of March, so I have about 8 weeks until my last frost date, which is really good timing for a lot of those seeds. Next on the list, containers blowing over or shifting. High winds can tip over lightweight containers. I talked about how to use the bungee cord to string all of your milk jugs together if you're doing that. And then for me, I think I'm okay with my container. If I feel like we're going to get like crazy, like 40-mile or plus winds, then like I said, I'll probably put some rocks on top of it just to weigh it down a little bit. Next, seeds get washed away. Heavy rains can cause soil and seeds to shift inside the container without proper drainage. So that's why, remember, on the container, the top of the container, I put holes around the edge. So the water flows down and the soil drinks it from below. I do that process instead of putting holes all across the center, because the holes across the center, they'll just drip the same over and over and over into the same container, and that will disperse the soil and the seeds and literally dig like a little like sink pit into your containers. So put your drainage holes around the outside. Last is weak or less leggy seedlings, and this is usually to insufficient sunlight once seedlings germinate. You just need to make sure that they are getting as much sun as possible once they germinate, so that they're not reaching for light and they don't become all leggy and long and thin. Okay, so winter sowing. I did not talk about all the varieties of seeds I was doing. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly list off the ones that I'm doing, because I can't remember if I did this at the beginning of the video. I'm doing another round of Bells of Ireland utilizing the winter sowing. Blue columbine. Let's see, saltwater taffy swirls sweet peas, Zinfandel sweet peas, Russell lupine. I'm also doing Solidago, verbascum, motherwort, black-eyed Susan vines, 2 varieties of milkweed. One is green and the other one I think is like antelope horns. I think that's correct. Bascom and delphinium. Did 2 varieties of delphinium as well. And so, as always, I will keep you guys updated whether I have fails or whether I have successes. Usually my winter sowing is a huge success or a masterful failure. I rarely get in between with winter sowing, which is one of the reasons why I don't typically winter sow. However, I wanted to show my process that I do, because I feel like it helps my brain. The process I do helps my brain understand winter sowing a little bit better. It's a little bit more organized chaos than using all the milk jugs. And this is a great variety, a great opportunity once again to start a bunch of seeds for a small amount of money, which is really awesome if we're budget gardening. I, of course, have had my lights for a long time. They are all been paid off. They're all from Walmart, very inexpensive and stuff. But even that, some people don't have the space in their house to do, the light setups. So winter sowing is an awesome opportunity to really get an opportunity to start a bunch of seeds that you wouldn't typically get to do. All right, that was a lot of information. Yeah. I'm always really like on winter sowing. Tons of people ask me every year, and I'm all like, I'm just a control freak. That's why I end up doing a lot of stuff inside. This will be good for me, y'all. This will be good for my soul to just branch out and let go and let Mother Nature control things. And who knows, I will say a lot of times when I have success with winter sowing, I get really beautiful, awesome seedlings. And so I think that is one of the biggest benefits of winter sowing, is the potential of some wonderfully strong seedlings. All right, you all, drop some comments below. Let me know what seeds you're doing with winter sowing, or if you have tips and tricks that work best for you. There's not one and done method for winter sowing. I've seen it adapted 20, 30 different ways. And so you can definitely adapt this to whatever works best for you, as long as you're following just some of the main stuff. Creating basically your own greenhouse, using a clear container that you can see all the way through and light can pass through, and then making sure that it's outside in full sunlight. Once you do a lot of those things, pretty much a lot of it will come along on its own. All right, as always, make sure you like and comment on the video. Every time you like and comment, it helps grow the channel so much. And if you don't feel comfortable leaving a comment, just drop me an emoji below, letting me know that you made it to the end of the video and that you say hi. And be sure to check me out on my social media outlets, including Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If TikTok gets banned, you can find me on YouTube Shorts. As always, she's a mad gardener or decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all.